name is Ryan Cordell. I'm an assistant professor in the English department at Northeastern University, and I work on the Viral Text Project, which is a collaboration with David Smith, who's a colleague in computer science, and Abby Mullen, who is a PhD student in the history department here. So with the Viral Text Project, we are trying to automatically identify reprinted texts from 19th century newspapers and magazines. So this is a period when newspaper content isn't protected by intellectual property law. And so the way that newspapers worked is that newspaper editors would subscribe to other newspapers, and when they came in, they would copy content from those newspapers for their own readers, and they would often change it when they did. They would add material, they would take material out, and we wanted to be able to trace that kind of sharing of text. I realized that these digital archives, if I searched for key phrases from this text, I could find many more copies than the best bibliography of the story knew about. And so this sort of keyed me into the potential for these large-scale archives to really expand what we know about reprinting. And that led to the question, well, okay, well, if I know the text, then I can search for key phrases and I can find more. But what about all those things that were widely reprinted that we don't know about anymore, right? And that's what led to the real computational question, which was, can we do this kind of bottom-up detection of reprinting of text that we don't know a priori? On the front end is an algorithm that was developed by David Smith in consultation with myself. And that is really text mining, right? Corpus linguistics, natural language processing, to try and identify these matching texts, even though they were changed during the 19th century, and then they were also changed when they were scanned, because they're bad OCR, basically. So we had to develop an algorithm that can compensate for textual differences, but still find these little clusters of text that are the same. Once we started doing the text mining, I thought, well, I really should figure out some way that I can represent these relationships, and that's where I started to experiment with network analysis. What Gephi has really allowed us to do is we have all of this just raw text data about shared newspaper pieces, and we can take that and quite quickly use that to begin to suss out what those texts might tell us about relationships among those publications. Frankly, when you're looking at 1.7 million shared texts, you can begin to maybe see some patterns, but it's difficult just sort of reading lines down a spreadsheet to understand those relationships in the way that you can when you visualize it as a network. I had no experience with digital tools at all, really, when this project started. As I sort of cast my mind back, I was doing quite traditional archival research, reading newspapers in a reading room. And I found this kind of weird reprinted text that I didn't know what to do with, and I started digging into it, and I found that it had been widely reprinted. And then I realized that these digital archives, if I searched for key phrases from this text, I could find many more copies than the best bibliography of the story knew about. And so this sort of keyed me into the potential for these large-scale archives to really expand what we know about reprinting. But every step along the way, there's a question that I want to answer, or you sort of find the tool that will help you answer that question, but you don't learn it all at once. And you don't learn all the tools before you start the research.